Everyone's mic's on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all good.
You guys ready?
Yeah, I guess
We're born ready.
I know that.
It's not Costa
Well, this
Rica.
didn't work out well at all.
Hey, welcome everyone. Everyone hear me okay? First of all, I'm going to be like your first grade teacher and remind everyone who's on the edges to get into the middle here because this is not going to be as full as the other sessions. And what these gentlemen are going to tell you is pretty informative about new markets and new crops. And so we're excited to have them, these farmers from around the country, to tell us their experience about growing these crops, what the pros are, what the cons are, in full disclosure here today. To do that, or before we do that, I'm just going to kind of set the stage a little bit on why this is an exciting time in new crops and new markets. If I can have my slides up, please. First of all, I should introduce myself. I'm Kevin McNew. I'm with the crop marketing team. As you go to the bathroom or go get some coffee, we're right out here. So feel free to stop by, talk to any of our crop marketing specialists, whether it's about new crops and the contracts we're doing at FBN, or whether it's about the FOB basis program we're doing and all the other things we're doing on the crop marketing side. But before we get into our panelists, I just want to talk about what are some of the key drivers that are instigating this change. There's two sort of prevailing forces that are coming together at the same time. On the one hand, you guys know this all too well, that conventional corn and bean production is under extreme pressure, and wheat as well, especially in our neck of the woods in Montana. We have a panelist here from Montana who talk about wheat, but the traditional crops are really feeling compressed margins right now. There doesn't seem to be any sort of real paradigm shift that's going to happen in the near term to change that. So farmers are looking for options. At the same time, there's things going on in the consumer market that are also exciting and revolutionary. We are seeing a broad change in sort of how consumers eat and what they're choosing to eat in the marketplace. And I think those two trends are shaping up very nicely right now to make this an exciting time. On the consumer side, maybe some of you have heard about it, maybe some of you are seeing it in the grocery store, but there is a fairly strong movement afoot to go to plant-based replacements in the diet, whether it's bean burgers, whether it's nut milks, whether it's margarines that are not made out of traditional commodities. We are seeing a lot of new products that consumers are gravitating to that dictate some of these or traditional crops being replaced with non-conventional crops like the pulses that we'll be talking about today. So we're seeing that in terms of new products in the consumer marketplace. We're also seeing a drive to more natural. And so some of the things that are going on with non-GMO are obviously driving some of those consumer trends. And then healthier options, things like hummus has become a more prominent staple in the diet for a lot of American consumers. The growth rates in these products are very, very large, 5, 8, 10% a year versus normal food trends, which are only up, 1 to 2% based on normal sort of rates of change. So while these are still small segments in the marketplace, they are growing rapidly, and I don't expect them to slow their growth in the near future. And so that leads to some exciting things happen. When we look at pulse acres, now this is a very small fraction of the overall cropland in the U.S., but it has what I call a hockey stick trend. I'm sorry, I'm from Montana, we play hockey, so we look at things like this and go, this is a hockey stick trend where it's flat for a long time, and then suddenly it takes that hockey stick swoop up in the last 2 to 3 years. So going from 1 to 1.5 million acres to 3 million acres just in a very quick amount of time, and I suspect this trend will continue to go higher. Now, if you're a farmer looking at pulse crops, you're looking at comparing GMO versus non-GMO corn and beans, you got a litany of questions you need to answer before you make this important decision. Agronomics, crop insurance, what's the difference in yield between what I've been doing and what I may be thinking about doing? Segregation, do I need to handle these things differently? Is that a huge cost? All these different things that you need to answer. And so what we're excited about today is to really sort of launch into a deeper dive with our farmer panel who has experience in these things to sort of get at that. Now, Charles did a really great job before the lunch period talking about the data that FBN brings to a lot of these questions. I can tell you that on the non-GMO versus GMO yield comparisons, we see, for the most part, no significant differences. These are non-GMO versus GMO corn on the left and beans on the right. These are just basically side-by-side comparisons of your data in the platform, and it's a little hard to tell, but basically they're pretty much on par with each other. Some people are a little less, some people are a little more, but on average they sort of average out to about no significant difference. In terms of yield, in terms of seed savings, we do see, as Charles mentioned, a lot of variation in seed prices, but the seed savings can be about $40 in corn and about $10 in beans. And this is, again, coming from the data that you all have provided. Now, our farmer panel, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm going to sit down and just enjoy their conversation. The way we're going to work this is we're going to go around and have them answer a few simple questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to you guys in the middle of this panel discussion to bring up your questions. So we're not going to wait till the end. So as you're hearing them, if you got questions, we'll have some microphones floating around. So let me get started, and Clay, I'm going to start with you and just have you introduce yourselves, and then we'll go down the line and have everyone else talk as well.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Clay Govier from central Nebraska, Broken Bow. I'm a fifth-generation farmer. I farm with my dad, my brother, about 3,500 acres, mostly corn and soybeans, but we've decided recently to start planting some more winter wheat and yellow field peas.
Awesome. Todd?
Hi, I'm Todd McCabe from northeast Montana. Fifth-generation farmer. My family's farmed in the area since the homestead days. And we raise, predominantly we're in a wheat area, small grains, oil seeds, pulse crops. And I farm with my wife and my kids.
Awesome, thanks. Mark, tell us a little bit about your farm and maybe why you made the changes you made.
Well, I'm Mark Gath from Laverne, Minnesota. I'm here for one reason and one reason only. That's because I ran into a mall last spring and I was picking up seed, and he's quite the convincing man. And so needless to say, we struck a little agreement and we planted some of these beans, and needless to say, he says you're going to be on the stage today. So you can't say no to a mall, so you just can't. But we farm by Laverne, Minnesota. Farm with my two boys. They're out in the audience over here. And farm over 10,000 acres. And basically it's a deal where it's a moving target all the time. The non-GMO beans are a really big deal, but the alliance that you have to have is with FBN, and I'll get into a little more of that after a while, but it's all corn and soybeans where we grow, and no wheat, and no specialty crops at all to speak of. So,
awesome. Pete, go ahead and finish it up for us.
Pete Zimmerman from Waseca, Minnesota, south central Minnesota, farm with my brother there, fifth generation, 3,000 acres, corn, soybeans, and hogs, and got into GMO or non-GMO corn stronger within the last 4 years. Several reasons for that. I can tell you financially, that's the number one reason. Number two is I'm a stubborn child, and I don't like to be told what to grow. I think a lot of people in here are kind of the same way, and when I'm told my only options are smart stacks, and it's not profitable, I start looking for other options that are, and kind of led me down the road to conventional corn again.
Awesome. Pete, I'm going to keep it on you here. So, when you've been doing this for 4 years now, you've got a lot of good data. You had your spreadsheet before we got on stage that you were ready to talk about. Maybe give us some highlights of what do you think have been the benefits or the negatives even from an agronomic standpoint in growing, non-GMO versus GMO corn and beans.
And I have to put a caveat in that I'm only qualified to speak about what's going on in my farm in south central Minnesota, and I feel uncomfortable trying to tell somebody from Missouri or Indiana or Montana what works. So take whatever I say with a healthy grain of salt. The conventional corn has come back into our operation again because initially we did see a small premium for that when we first started growing it. That kind of it was there for a year or so and it went away on us. But the economics of conventional corn in our operation made sense for the bulk of our operation. That being said, we do have a fair amount of peat ground on our farm too, and you know, Roundup was one of the big saviors for us back in the 80s to allow us to get productivity out of some of these fields that were very hard to control weeds on, and so that was what brought us there. And now we've kind of come back around for full circle, seeing some areas where picking up some farms where Roundup doesn't work anymore, and so we're looking at those saying, why are we paying the premium for the seed when that control program doesn't work for us anyway? So
Awesome. And Mark, on your side, on the beans, you know, have you noticed any sort of yield drag on beans, and what's been your sort of experience with the agronomic side of the business?
No, this is our first year of it, and we grew some beans that were designed to be used for bean sprouts for food edible in Japan. And where we planted them, it was a field that we had not planted last year, pre-9 acres. And so, you know, using conventional soybeans without Roundup, it's like, okay, this might not be a good idea. But it turned out fine. The weed control we had was excellent, and there was no yield drag. It was, I was pretty happy with it. The beans are very small. They're designed for that. I'm thinking there's going to be no yield on this, and the yield is the same as anything else.
Is that right?
So I was really happy about that. So
Yeah. Gotcha. And Todd, you know, you had a rough weather year in northeast Montana where we had a really intense drought. You know, how do you think your pulses stood up against wheat this year?
Amazingly enough, the pulses yielded right with our main wheat crop. You know, it really was quite amazing how water efficient the pulses are, and you know, it's a testament to in our area, and that's why we're in the pulses, is to be profitable in wheat, you got to raise 40, 50 bushel, and that sometimes is not an option. And with some of these pulses, you raise a drought out crop like we did this year, 10, 12 bushel, and you can still be profitable. But raising 10, 12 bushel wheat, you're going to go backwards. And that's where we're at with the pulse crops.
Right. And Clay, you know, you come from traditional corn and bean country in central Nebraska. You know, you stuck your neck out and tried some dried peas. What's been your experience with that?
So we've only been growing the yellow field peas for 3-4 years now, and had quite a bit of success, actually. I think initially we started growing them as a kind of a risk management, plus, you know, you get a lot of agronomic benefits to your soil as well, but you know, the inputs are so much less growing peas than say corn, for example. So, you know, if it just depend the way the year works out. If you're you know, if you're going to break even growing field peas or break even growing corn, I'd rather spend half as much money and break even just to kind of mitigate your risks there.
Yeah. I mean, from a soil nutrient standpoint, you know, what kind of benefits do you, I assume you're rotating them with your corn and bean crops over the land, and what kind of benefits are you seeing in that regard?
Right. So, I mean, you know, there's definitely soil health benefits. Like Todd said, there's the water use efficiency of field peas is just incredible compared to soybeans or corn. So it doesn't take that much water to grow a decent field pea crop. And then that water use efficiency follows on for the next crop and even potentially the crop after that. So we've grown the best corn following peas on some of our dryland fields that we ever have, you know, since we've been farming these particular pieces of ground. And so, you know, even if you only break even growing peas, or, you know, just make a little bit of money, you almost have to look at what it's going to do for the following crop.
Right, so the benefits and the nutrients for the next year's crop.
Right.
Absolutely. Very good. Hey, I want to take this time, and I'm sure some of you might have some questions, so let's see if anyone's got any questions. Raise your hand. We'll take any questions anyone might have right now.
No, my individual operation is all dry land, and we are cooler. We're close to the Canadian border, but in my mind, field peas for us is the soybean of the north. It's our go-to rotation in a wheat rotation, and it's short season, our growing season. We don't have the growing season to raise the corn and beans like the Midwest does, and it's a real good niche for our northern tier climate.
So, and I guess for our operation in central Nebraska, normally I think we would typically focus on your dry land acres, but this last year we actually did plant a couple pivots to field peas, and it just so happened that it didn't rain in June or July, and you could really tell that it was starting to stress out the dry land pivot corners, and they ended up yielding like mid-30s as far as bushels, whatever, and then we only had to put on maybe 2.5 to 3 inches of water under the pivots, and we were in the mid-70s for bushels. So just that little bit of water at a critical time made a huge difference in our operation. So, and then the other thing nice thing, I guess I'm not sure where you're from, sir, but it's kind of nice to be able to plant peas in the beginning of March and harvest them in the end of July, and because it just, instead of all of your corn and beans have to be planted at the same time and harvested at the same time, so it kind of breaks up your planting and harvest cycles and reduces some of that stress too. We took everything to Gavilon and Hastings this year, so it's a bit of a hike, and I guess that's one thing we'll probably talk about a little bit later, where FBN's now marketing, they have some marketing options, and where they'll actually provide the pickup on your farm right out of the field. So I think that's going to be a pretty good opportunity that we're going to explore this year.
So on those peas you were taking to Gavilon, did you contract those, or were you just taking a spot price on delivery, or how flexible are they on pricing that?
It was a production contract, just on a per acre basis, and then we locked in a price when we did that contract, and then they just everything else that we, because I think we estimated that we weren't going to yield quite as well as we ended up yielding, and everything above that they just gave us the same price. So
Gotcha.
Anyway.
Nice. Other questions from the audience? These are all good questions. So. Yes. Oh.
My question is probably for Peter. Didn't know if you are feeding non-GMO crops, corn and bean meal, to your hogs, and if you've seen any feed efficiency gains from that.
No, all of our hogs are contracted. All the feed is coming in outside of the operation, so we haven't fed any of our own corn to those. I know of an operation nearby that is specifically looking for and feeding conventional corn to their sows. I haven't asked them point blank why, but they believe they're getting better. I think they're getting better intake with conventional corn. That's their belief anyway.
Yeah, I saw another question over here.
In terms of non-GMO corn, what have you seen with added inputs on the front end and management to try and keep weed control down?
Sure.
Second one is in terms of dry land production on either of these, whether it be pulses or non-GMO corn, is it difficult to hit delivery specs in terms of what they want and things of that nature? From northeast Colorado, so you could call us extreme dry land, so sure. A little different that way. But
so as far as costs go, if you're looking at a scale, the scale starts with a big drop with the seed cost. Our seed cost is between Smart Stacks corn and conventional corn. The cost per acre is $40 to $45 an acre cheaper. So you're starting out with that in the bank. From there, it starts coming back up because the Smart Stacks is kind of an easy button. People get a little uptight when I say that, but conventional corn takes more management with it. We don't cheat on it. We are applying a full recommended rate of granular insecticide in furrow. So that's adding $15 an acre there. The contract is calling for it to be dried down to no wetter than 14.5%, so we're going to have a little extra drying cost involved there. We kind of go back and forth. I can come up with chemical programs that are within $1 an acre, or I can go balls to the wall and be $15 an acre higher if I want to or need to be to make sure I'm covering that. I'm trying to protect every bushel potential that I can get and doing what I need to do on that. In the end, our conventional corn is still easily $15 an acre less production-wise, and probably realistically more like $25 an acre below. And again, with no yield penalty. That's the number one question that gets asked to me, and I can say that very straightforward. There's no yield penalty for conventional corn. With the premium that's added on top of that, in the end, we're looking at conservatively $80 to $100 an acre difference in our operation between conventional corn and GMO corn. That's where we're at.
But I agree with Clay. But the conventional corn, we planted a couple thousand acres this year for the first time, since Smart Stacks and all the rest of them come out. It was the best corn we had.
Yeah.
And in our operation, we run a 2-year bean, 1-year corn rotation. And I'm kind of a guy that hates corn because corn, I believe, everyone makes money on me but me because there's so much volume and everything else, and I just love soybeans. But with that rotation, the bugs are not a problem. But our corn was making over 250 bushels the acre consistently. It was a 103-day corn.
Mm-hmm.
But if anyone's scared to plant the conventional, don't be, because we had some Smart Stacks that just went flat on us. And I was really upset about that because they're expensive, and you go, why am I planting this stuff? But, with the 2-year bean, the rotation then for management levels drop because you don't have to be quite so concerned about rootworms. And that's the number one thing. And the corn boards this year were non-existent. We had no shot holding at all. I was really surprised by that. So, but it works.
Excellent. I want to keep it down here on our non-GMO guys. Tell us a little bit about what your experience has been with, post-harvest. Pete, you mentioned, keeping the moisture down to 14.5%. I mean, what other things should a farmer be thinking about in this regard in terms of segregation, in terms of working with an end buyer? What are some of the things you've seen in the marketplace? Sure.
Obviously there's going to be some segregation there. So there's going to be a little bit of planning put in as far as how we're going to be harvesting that. We can work that into our bean rotation where we would start on the conventional corn, get that out, switch over to soybeans, come back on conventional or some combination of it. There's times when it's easy. There's times when it's a pain in the butt that you have to start getting things cleaned out. Mother Nature can work for you or against you on that. It's a coin flip year to year. So segregation on that, I think, is manageable. It's just another part of the whole program that we have to deal with. Again, we have to make sure that we are drying that down. That's one of the requirements of the contract, is to make sure that is, normally we dry our corn down to 15.5% and put it in the bin. And with the FBN contract, they're very specific. It has to be no more than 14.5%. So that's going to take a little more work on our part. But beyond that, I think we're pretty well set up to manage that for $100 an acre, we can figure it out.
Right. Makes it worth its time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. Mark, on your end?
Segregation, it's a real pain cleaning out a combine, especially, you got 2, 3 of them sitting there, but you sit there for 3, 4 hours, get them all cleaned out, and that's all right. The segregation, our stuff went straight to a bin. It was brought to Miller, South Dakota, so it was just done, and that was what it was. But we just had soybeans, but they were dry. They're 11%, so there was no concern with that. So,
Gotcha.
right.
And back to our Pulse guys here, how's it been, post-harvest, segregating and, managing the sort of differences of a food-grade crop?
I mean, for us, there's really hasn't been that big of a deal. We harvest all of our peas. They go directly to the elevator, and then we're going to switch to. I mean, soybeans would be the next thing that we'd harvest, and there's just really not that much, and whoever's buying the soybeans doesn't care about a few peas in the bottom. So we don't have anything to worry about in that regard. Yeah.
Todd, on your end?
For us in our area with peas, lentils, chickpeas, and for those of you that are not familiar with them, there's 3 different sizes of lentils. There's 3 different colors. They're all market specific. Segregation is huge. And your end buyer, the pulses, and that's where FBN's got a fit. I like their idea of working with sourcing the product to the end user. Because with these peas and lentils, there's processors looking for some looking for small red lentils or a large green lentil, and those varieties. And you really, before you seed these pulses, you need to know what market you're chasing and where you're going to go with that product. And even with the peas, there's green peas, there's yellow peas, there's Austrian winter peas, there's colors, there's a lot of those pea markets are very variety specific, because some of them, they're just grinding them. A lot of the yellows get ground into flour, and the pea flour market is a big thing. A lot of the greens, they do a lot of splitting. You'll see the split peas in the grocery store. So segregation and knowing your variety and knowing your market is real big for us. And even in the chickpeas, there's a Kabuli chickpea and a Desi chickpea, and they're a totally different market, a totally different buyer. So segregation is huge in this pulse thing, and knowing where you're going to market that crop. Having a buyer that wants that variety, wants that color, wants that size, it's a big deal. But doing that extra work, there's premiums out there too. You'll get paid for it, growing what your end user wants.
Awesome. And keeping it on the pulse, guys, let's talk a little bit about risk management from crop insurance. I mean, you're growing crops that are not traditional corn and beans, and how was it working in the crop insurance world in these kind of specialty crops?
Well, I guess for our operation, nobody really grows field peas in central Nebraska. So last year we totally rolled the dice and didn't put any crop insurance on anything. We could have put straight hail on, and I think that probably would have made sense. But now that we have enough yield data, we're going to be able to submit a written agreement and try to get some crop insurance in that avenue for next year. So we'll see what that turns out to be, and then I'm imagining we're going to put some straight hail on things just to kind of cover our bases there.
Gotcha. And Todd, in your neck of the woods in Montana?
For me, sadly enough, this year I know way too much about crop insurance with our drought. But honestly, insuring pulse crops for me in our area, because these are mainstay proven crops for our area, very easy to get insurance. But the big thing with my operation is right now with wheat, durum, it's hard to ensure profitability with our wheat crop. Insuring wheat, even some of the oil seeds, I can't buy enough insurance to be profitable. The pulse crop insurance, I can insure a profit even in a drought year, and that's what makes the pulses so attractive to me. And we have very good insurance programs, and it is changing. That's one thing you want to be aware of with growing pulses is now coming out in 2018, they're changing rotational restrictions. You know, they want 2 years of wheat or an oilseed. You've got to watch your rotations to make sure that you're still insurable on that crop. You know, there is some issues there. They want you to rotate, and agronomically, it's the right thing to do, and I think that rotation is helping us all the way around through all our crops. But the insurance is good with the pulses. It worked. I mean, this year we wouldn't have lived without it, with a quarter-inch of rain from the 1st of April to the 1st of August.
Excellent. And I'll open it up to any other questions we might have. We got some more questions to give up here, but if you guys got any questions at this point, we'll fire away at our panelists. I'm sure they're ready to give you their answers. Yes, sir, right down here.
Any cover crops in any of the operations?
Yep. I mean, that was actually, for us, that was one of the main reasons that we wanted to go plant peas, because we harvest them in July and then we can get a really diverse cover crop on after that, then rent out that for grazing or whatever. But yeah, that was a big part of why we decided to plant peas in the first place.
You guys?
I've tried cover crops in our area, just like Clay says. I tried to go in after peas or after an early winter wheat harvest, but in my experience, it's been tough to get that done in our area because we don't have enough growing season to make a cover crop work. On my farm, I would have to dedicate that acre in the spring to get enough growth to see the benefits that you guys in the Midwest are probably seeing with cover crops. I believe in it, but I can't make it work with my growing season.
Guys on your end?
No cover crops with us.
Nope.
Yep.
I guess with the pulses, the peas, lentils, and the crops I raise, the compatibility with I'm a wheat farmer. That's how I started. We're in a wheat farming area, but our equipment basically the same. But yeah, flex heads, just like your soybeans. And one big thing in our area is rock rollers. You got to roll the rocks, pick the rocks. They're hard on combines. And lentils only grow boot top high sometimes. You lay that header on the ground and you push it around. So yeah, harvest is slower. It's more maintenance. It's tougher on equipment, but basically same equipment that I'm using in my wheat operation.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, we've got a 1990 John Deere air seeder plant on 7.5-inch, or drill on 7.5-inch spacing, 350,000 population, give or take. And then, yeah, we're harvesting with just a 30-foot flex head. And I guess we hadn't had this experience, but we tried to learn from our neighbors. One neighbor that was actually growing some peas tried to use a flex draper, and apparently the peas just really tie together at the trundle things, and they would just roll over the back of the flex draper because it didn't have the auger to bring them into the center. So that's what they said their experience was, and we were going to try it. So we've got a flex draper for beans and just a flex head for peas.
The flex drapers will work very well, but that pea auger, that's what they literally call it, in the back of your header, it does help because, with that, when you're on a draper and those vines are fluffy, it's hard to get it to feed. But, yeah, those pea augers will help you, and you can take them in and out. So that's an option.
Yeah, and I guess the reason why we just got to use flex head, and it was as cheap as getting the pea auger kit. So we were just like, we'll just have two.
Other questions? Yes, right down here.
For the conventional corn, do you segregate your fields? Do you worry about what the neighbor has? Can that cross-pollinate and goof up your non-GMO type products? And then on the pulse crops, disease issues with pulse crops that you might have?
Yes, we do segregate our fields. And we have the type of operation where that's not that difficult to do, whether it's roads, trees, lakes, bean fields, whatever we need to do. And then we'll plant our conventional, basically our conventional acreage in blocks. So we know that this end of the farm basically is all conventional. Because it's a weed control issue too. You don't want the guy on the sprayer that had a rough night last night getting out there and, oh, that's right, I put Roundup on there. So we want to make sure that we're segregating that. So we're making that a little simpler to say, okay, this block, we're loading up and we're spraying this on this end of the farm today, and then we can put Roundup in tomorrow and start on the other stuff.
So we had a field this year, and it was funny because I talked to the elevator manager, and I said, look, we're going to have all these acres of conventional corn, which we've never had. So I said, it'd be really bad if we spray a field and kill it. So I get a call, and it's like June 12th, and they're out spraying, and the guy calls me. He says, tell me what we planted in that field. And I said, conventional corn, and it was 240 acres, and he had 20 acres left that he hadn't sprayed with Roundup. So we got to go back in and replant corn into it, and so that's what it happens. It really does, and trust me, non-conventional corn really does die under Roundup. So
Lives up to its name.
it does. Yeah, it works. Segregation? We don't have any setbacks.
You can just take it right up to the neighbor's fence line.
Right.
Pretty much.
Excellent. Other questions?
It becomes more of a drift issue on us then, if we're right up to the neighbor's fence line and he's spraying Roundup. What's your tolerance level? We'd like to have something in there as a buffer.
I
I farm
think we
northeast
have,
South Dakota.
I think we have another question over here on diseases and pulses. I'll let our pulse guys answer.
Yeah, not that I have a whole lot to add, because we haven't really experienced any disease pressure on our farm. So I feel like we've just really been having a lot of dumb luck with our pea growing operation. But yeah.
What was the question?
Disease pressure.
The disease pressure on pulses.
You've tried peas, you get a powder down.
Yep. Yeah. And, I guess I can say I live in a land of extremes. 2016, it wouldn't quit raining. And 2017, I didn't know what it looked like. And in 2016, there was a lot of disease pressure in the pulse crops. They grow low to the ground if you've got standing water. And a lot of your fungicides, the Preaxers, many different fungicide options, and work with your agronomist because it's for real. The Ascotida, you want to check your seed treat, the root rots. There is definitely disease issues with raising pulses, and I'd say more so in the wet year. The lentils, they're an arid crop, and they don't like their feet wet. And when you're getting rain every 3-4 days, you're going to start getting leaf diseases. And it's worth it, especially when those pulse crops are flowering. It's very crucial, your disease. Keep the leaves clean. It's going to be a big yield drag. For instance, our lentil crop in 2016 was great. It was 35, 40 bushel lentils. And I used 2 ounces of pre-axer on them twice, once in crop spraying, once at flowering. And I did that, and these a half section right next to each other. And the half section right next to it didn't have any fungicide, and there was probably a 25 bushel yield difference. And that's pretty huge at $15 to $18 a bushel. It'll pay for your fungicide. So it's something you want to watch.
Other questions? I think I saw something down here. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'll start over. I'm down in the very deep south. It's very hot, humid. We had a neighbor do some conventional corn, but he just couldn't make it work due to the disease pressure, fungal issues, pests, and all. I was just wondering if this is a viable option for our area. I know you guys are mostly a lot farther north than us, but is there anything that can make this work for us?
Honestly, I'm not qualified to answer that because I don't know what all your pressures are. I would say that being in Minnesota, I know I have a set growing season, and I know when winter comes, a lot of the problems I have are going to die, and I'll start with a clean slate the next spring. In the South, you don't have that. You've got other things going for you, but you've got that going against you. So, I know in my area that I have a set parameter, set number of issues to work with or against me each year, and that's the best I can tell you.
On a different subject matter, the one thing that I'm concerned about, like with these beans, or any of these specialty crops that we're talking about up here, is the dicamba drift. Okay, and everybody's going to experience the problem. So what we're going to do is we're big into drones. We use drones in all our scouting, things like this. Last year we took our drones and we would take the drone and we'd fly down on the deck on the beans and blow the beans apart and count the aphids. And the agronomist walks out in the field and he says, you need to spray. Well, he's only walking out there 100 feet, so we don't really believe him. So in mass, we looked at the fungicide thing. We're working with some companies on that too, about fungal growth and stuff like that to identify it. But we saved $150,000 last year by not spraying. And we did side-by-side strips, and we were right, and everyone else was wrong. But on the dicamba side of it, I'm really concerned about if you've got a quarter section of these beans, and this is high-dollar stuff, I don't want my neighbor spraying that dicamba. So we haven't quite decided yet, me and my boys, but we're thinking about taking a drone and like these guys have got here at the conference and flying a line every day for 2, 3, 4 miles, and then you have your maps, and then every day you do that because when the spring season starts, I want to know which way that dicamba is drifting because I need to know who to go talk to and who sprayed what on the other side. So and you're all going to get hit with this because we had a lot of beans that got smacked this year. We grew a lot of Roundup beans also, but the dicamba just curled them, and everyone says there's no yield drag, and maybe that's true, but the big three will come out and tell you there's not a yield drag, and the farmer over here says, hey, I think it was just as good as I had on my other field. You know what I mean? But I said, but I'm supposed to take your scientist's point of view and say this is the best seed to plant, but you're taking the farmer view on when it's good for you, and I don't like that. And it's something you really got to be concerned about. It really is. And if you're going to have a partner on the prairie, FBN has got to be it, because I feel that I would have never done any of this without a mall meeting him or FBN. And, it's like the conventional corn. They had $1 premium a couple years ago, 3, 4 years ago. Now it's gone to nothing. And the same thing will happen with whatever these guys are growing and whatever I'm growing. And FBN has to be that company that moves forward and says, look, that's the next thing we're going to throw at you. And if you're already in the system, you'll get to be that guy that says, hey, look, forget that, we're going here. Because there's only so many acres of this stuff in the countryside. And I think we're very fortunate to be here and be able to have the opportunity to work with FBN in that respect.
Awesome. So before we're going to go down the panel one last time, and then we'll come back to your questions. So if you still got questions, hold them for just a few minutes. But everyone's done a great job, but I want you to sort of paint for us, each of you, what's your vision for your own farm going forward here as you've made this leap into specialty crops. And then, from a market standpoint, we appreciate the plugs for FBN, and obviously we're trying to help. But what do you see as sort of things that could change in the marketplace that could help you? So Clay, I'm going to start with you. What's your farm's, viewpoint going forward in specialty crops, and what do you think the market could do differently to help you as a farmer?
Well, I think, what we're trying to pursue on our farm is just increasing rotational diversity for, all the agronomic reasons and all the, trying to fight back herbicide-resistant weeds. So by planting crops that have different, planting and harvest cycles, you're also breaking up those weed pressure patterns as well, and any sort of pests for that matter. So, and then by doing that, some of these lower input crops do good things for your soil. I really believe that we're going to be able to cut back our fertilizer and herbicide costs probably roughly in half in 3 to 5 years if we can really push this more rotational diversity and more cover crops and things of that nature. And then what could the market do to support that? I guess that's one thing that's kind of a pain for us because, we have to haul these peas a lot further than, any of the other crops that we're growing. So, in central Nebraska, the market is developed around ethanol and cattle and hog production. And so there's just not a lot of reason for growing peas for a lot of guys. It's also a really good feed source. So, I don't know if there's just a certain amount of education that whether it's FBN or just anybody in general can do to, like, say, maybe some of the local livestock producers start incorporating some of these different pulses or something into their ration, and developing a market for it. So
very good. Todd, how about you in Northeast Montana?
I guess really one of the main reasons for coming to this conference is talking to the marketing team, and I guess their vision for the future is I'm very interested in what they're doing and opening these new markets like he talked about earlier, hummus. If you told me 20 years ago that I'm looking to raise chickpeas for the hummus market, I'd have told you you're crazy, but it's reality. And it's a huge thing that FBN is opening up for all of us, these niche markets, these new marketing opportunities. And yeah, that's kind of my vision for the future, is to get closer to the consumer with some of these crops. Because to be honest with you, in my career, I've had anything that's traded on the Board of Trade, I usually have a hard time profiting on my farm. That's sad to say, but these specialty markets, there's opportunities there, and I think that is the future.
Excellent. Mark, how about you?
I look at it on our farm, we're businessmen first and we're farmers second, because it all comes down to the dollar. That's why we're all here. Let's say, if corn goes back to $7 a bushel, I've told my sons, I says, this time no one takes their foot off the gas, because if everyone got lazy before, you can't be lazy, because the landlords aren't going to take the pressure off of you. The seed companies, everyone else is going to continue to apply that pressure. And I would like to get, $12 for a bushel of corn if it's only $7 at the elevator, because at that moment it might become easier just to plant the Monsanto Smart Stack corn versus doing a little more work. And I think that's our opinion on the whole deal. It's not easy, but it's a lot of fun. So, yeah.
Pete?
I was listening to Rob O'Neill up here last night, and he put up that slide as far as what's the biggest dangers to his mission, and he said success and complacency, and we had the success of the $7 corn, And I think we all agree that, that was great, but it didn't do us any favors in the long run either. And the complacency, we are a segment that has a hard time adapting to changes. We like to do the things we grew up with. We like to do the things that we've always done. Now, we seem to be doing better on that with technology, but the pushback that I get from other farmers, that they see those numbers there, but they just really are entrenched in what they've always been doing. And there's a real strong mentality out there in the countryside amongst a lot of farmers that this is what the co-op wants me to do, basically, for lack of a better way of explaining it. And I find that really troubling. And we have to be more adaptable. We can't be complacent. We have to be out there looking for ways to make our operations better, because nobody else is going to do it for us. It's up to us to do it.
Excellent. Well, thank you, panelists. Let's open it up for any last-minute questions. We're running a little short on time, so just maybe one or two real quick. Yes, right here in the front.
With you growing non-GMO crops, do you ever use non-GMO as maybe a stepping ground towards getting more towards organic?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it? We can't hear it up here.
Growing non-GMO crops, are you looking at the non-GMO as a stepping stone to go more towards organic?
I'm still not quite, I heard the whole...
He's saying, are you using non-GMOs as a stepping stone to possibly going organic?
Oh.
Any thoughts
Is
of
it
going
yeah,
organic?
the stage to going organic.
Organic's a tough one.
Nope. That's the simple.
Next question.
We only have a little fun, drink a little beer, It's like, yeah.
The question was, are you using non-GMO to go to organic? And the answer was a no. So,
I mean, I guess me personally, like, I wouldn't mind, but we're also pretty serious no-tillers. So, I mean, I think most organics are very heavy in tillage. So I think that's kind of anti, our philosophy. But there's research out there that if your crop rotation is diverse enough and you can incorporate cover crops, and that there's a chance that you can actually do no-till organics, which I'm pursuing in a small scale, I guess, but possibly. But no, probably.
I believe there are some opportunities. California just passed a law that states that if you have a GPS-driven tractor, if it's over 2 miles an hour, you have to have an operator within 15 or 20 feet of it or on the tractor. Now, it makes no sense because it's GPS driven. You're going to put a Tesla truck on the road in California. But I believe that is just to protect the immigrants and their jobs. But if that's the case, if you're in the Imperial Valley, there may be some crops that we can't grow in the Midwest. But if that were to happen and they want to take care of all the immigrants there, guys like us should be able to make some money on that opportunity, because the companies are going to move west somewhere to fill that void.
excellent. Well, I apologize. We're out of time here. Our panelists have done a great job. Please thank them for